to our March 15th, 2018 regular Board of Education meeting. We will open the meeting with the pledge to the flag. Moving right into our public comment on agenda items. Should you have a comment on the agenda, please approach the podium and state your name and town of residence. Okay, so then we will move right into reports with our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Michael Brooks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. And we've got quite an ambitious agenda here and a bunch of things to get to. Certainly want to welcome our friends from Orange Ulster BOCES. Thank you for coming out. Mr. Hecht, District Superintendent from Orange Ulster BOCES, and your contingent.
I'll introduce them later.
Great. We'll bring you up when we get ourselves into the budget process. So just a few updates for the Board of Education. This week began kindergarten registration, and we had a bunch of little ones visiting here at district office as they had their parents filling out their paperwork, excited about beginning things for September as kindergartners. And so far we've registered 101 kindergartners for September. So it's a little bit more than we had registered at this point last year, so that's interesting. It really doesn't tell the tale of what we'll end up with in September, but it's nice to see that the youngsters are pretty excited, and moms and dads and families are pretty excited about getting their formal education started. I actually am going to ask Mrs. Hecht if she would take the reins right now and give the board another brief update regarding STEM. We're actually pretty active in the process now of making some adjustments and forward-looking approaches to our STEM program. So, Ms. Hecht, I'll pass it to you.
Okay. I'll just run through some things quickly. Please stop me if you want clarification. The makerspace and flexible learning spaces, we continue to meet Mr. Bocatsius, the STEM committee, and the building principals to evaluate and look at the spaces and see how we can address those and make them better learning spaces. I've been working with the middle school principal, Ms. Clinton, and I have been working on visiting other schools. Van Wyck High School she has scheduled now for April 25th, and some other schools as well. We've also met with the Barnes & Noble business rep, and they have shared with us all the robotics and coding materials that they have at a 40% discount, and they work with schools designing curriculum, lesson plans. They connect it to literacy and math. So it's been very exciting sharing those tools, and we've set up a lot of workshops that are coming up in March and April and May with the STEM committees, with the department chairs, the team leaders, and the principals to try to increase that awareness. In the folders that you have in front of you, you have the March STEM e-newsletter. And you can look at that, and then you should also have the MES Student Tech Squad newsletter. So those are fifth graders at the elementary school, and they have designed a newsletter to share with you to show some of the work that they are doing in the classroom. And I have to say, for fifth graders, they are doing an amazing job. They show up at the last period of the day, they have an assignment, they go off on their own, and it's really student-led. And a wonderful job to Karen D'Amato, who's also coordinating that for us. In addition to that, we are meeting again March 23rd with the middle school and high school STEM committee. They're already beginning work on developing a curriculum with STEM skills. And they're doing a top-down, so they're starting at the high school, looking at colleges, and moving it down. We'll soon be moving next into the sixth grade and then down to the fifth grade, and so forth and so on, hoping to get that done by the beginning of September. Discover E-Week is at the high school, and that should be tomorrow, actually, around noontime, so we're hoping to get up there and check out what they're doing. It's also at the middle school, and I do have some material I can share with you later to show you some of the things that they will be doing. It's really exciting. I went through that whole Discover E-Week packet, and it's just amazing. Sorry I get so excited. I mean, tonight I was looking at materials and curriculum from a website called explore.com, and we can teach children how to make apps to make a cat feeder while you're away, feed your cat. And it's just amazing, the things that kids can do, and I'm excited. I want to do it with them. I also met with Project Lead the Way with reps. Ms. Walsh and I are working with Highland Falls, Goshen, and Greenwood Lake to look at their Project Lead the Way and see if that's something that Marlborough would like to embark on. It is a program that has 4 modules per grade level. You'd start with 1 module per year, but we do have to train teachers that would have to lead that program. But it looks very doable and exciting. So that's just one of the projects that we're working on. We have rescheduled our Google certification class for our middle school and high school students for April 27th. And yesterday we did a webinar, Tour the Robots for Elementary Schools. I've also contacted the IBM ambassador, Sheila Appler, who's going to be meeting with Ms. Clinton and myself to talk more about learning spaces and maker spaces and seeing how we can continue to be partners there.
Hey, did she respond to you on that?
Not yet.
Okay, because I'm actually I'll probably come with her on that as the STEM ambassador role. But I was trying to use this as kind of a good opportunity to get her to have some face time, because we've been trying to find that time, so this might be a good time. So I was going to follow up with you after this meeting about that, because I haven't really got a chance to do much with it.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that's pretty much where we are. I mean, that's encapsulated. There's STEM going on all day long in the classes. So it's not something that's new to us, but it's something that is extremely exciting. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you very much. A question was raised to me and asked to brief the board on our hiring process. Just as a reminder, it is a thorough process, and you see some folks that we were hiring tonight and certainly have hired in the past and will in the future, so that there's a clear understanding. When we have an opening, we always post it internally via paper, as most of our contracts require. Also, most positions get posted on our online application system, which is a statewide online portal for posting positions, and there's many resumes and applicants that are using that system in order to apply. As a matter of fact, we require, as do most districts, that our applications come through that so we can process it for an application as well. Resumes are then reviewed, and an interview group is selected to review those resumes and conduct interviews, and candidates are invited to and scheduled for interviews. From that, the committee conducts interviews, and a consensus is typically formed around a candidate. Once that candidate is identified, the hiring official, usually it's an administrator or a director, checks references, checks certification, runs fingerprints as required under New York State law, and then writes a recommendation to me for the recommendation to the Board of Education for hiring. I do conduct final interviews for all professional positions, whether they be administrative or teaching. So that's a final step in the process. And then once I have finalized my interview of them and agree with the principal or the director and the hiring committee, I put that candidate forward to the Board of Education for consideration at the next board meeting, and then the board reviews those positions and votes regarding those positions. So it's a multifaceted, thorough process that we use and are very meticulous with it. So that's our process. Mr. Witherow has an update for the Board of Education regarding the Bayside project. We did provide a written update to the board and sort of a roadmap, so to speak, regarding Bayside. So I'm going to hand the torch over to Mr. Witherow to walk through that process and help the board in a organized way come to some understanding and maybe action.
Sure, thank you. So we did send out the information packet. We had the presentation, I believe at the last board meeting, to go over the proposals. And just for the public's information, adjacent to the middle school, there's a proposal right now from Bayside Construction to construct multi-unit apartment housing. We call it the Bayside Development. As part of that process, we approached the developer and the town, through the town, we approached the developer with some proposed site improvements at the middle school. We know the middle school has issues with traffic flow. We have limited space just in terms of land, and we wanted to try and do something to improve student safety in terms of drop-off and pickup with the bus traffic and the parent vehicle traffic. So what the developer has agreed to do is to put there's going to be a new road that's going to come up into the Bayside development from the existing traffic light that's at the end of Young Avenue, which is the road that goes to our elementary school. That new road that's going to come up into the development, there was going to be 2 driveway connections onto the middle school property. The existing exit from the middle school, the one-way road that comes down to 9W, there's a proposal to increase the paving on both sides of that to allow for additional event parking. So what basically would happen is we'd have 2 new driveways so that all vehicle traffic, parent drop-off traffic, would come up 9W through the new road, circle into the middle school property, drop the children off, and then go back out through the new road to 9W, where now they come off of Birdsall, go through the property, and then exit down that one-way road. Bus traffic would come off of Birdsall, drop students off at a separate area, and then bus traffic would then exit through the Bayside Development's new road down to 9W. So the developer has agreed to make those improvements and has given us a memorandum of understanding with the various proposals and options for the board to consider. As part of that process, we're required to go through a SECRA process, which is State Environmental Quality Review Act. So part of that process is declaring who the lead agency is on the development, the work that would be proposed to be done on the middle school property. So what we've done is prepare a short environmental assessment form, basically declaring the district as the lead agency and identifying the State Education Department and the Town of Marlborough as interested agencies. So what we're proposing, and we met with Facilities Committee and briefed them prior to this meeting, we would like to, under new business, see if we could pass the resolution declaring the district as the lead agency. That gives us 30 days. We would tomorrow circulate a letter to State Education Department and Town of Marlborough informing them that we've declared ourselves to be the lead agency in this project, and that offers an opportunity for them to comment and provide suggestions or kind of object and say that they want to be the lead agency, which we don't expect to happen. So there's a 30-day period of time that has to elapse from the time we circulate that letter. If we don't receive any objections after 30 days, we can pass a resolution declaring a negative declaration on the project, and then we can move forward to accept the proposed work by the developer. So basically, we're asking the board to consider under new business adopting the resolution declaring us as lead agency so we can get that process moving.
Any questions about where we are with that?
We're gonna do them now, we're gonna do them when we do,
We can wait till,
We could do new business.
yeah.
sounds good. All right.
Thank
so-
you.
Pat's good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Couple of other items, SUNY Ulster. We've re-engaged a dialogue with SUNY Ulster. I know a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, I announced that the SUNY Ulster initiative had come to an end, but actually the president reached out to me about 3 weeks ago saying, wait a minute, maybe it hasn't. And myself, the college president, Dr. Roberts, and a couple of other Southern Ulster superintendents have been talking, and we had a dialogue as recently as today, about preparing a program that would be offered here at the Milton Building to potentially offer 200 level classes from SUNY Ulster, and in the long run set up a path where students would be able to leave high school with their associate's degree. There are some challenging courses that are hard for high schools to offer through the college adjudication process because of credentials needed by the instructors. For example, the 12th grade social studies offering in New York State is half a year of participation in government and half a year of economics. That's two college classes, a government class and an economics class. Most high school teachers are social studies teachers, social studies certified, and they don't have a master's in either economics or in government. And that's one of the requirements in order to be an adjunct professor or a professor at the college level. So we'd be able to offer a class like that here at a SUNY site and get over that hurdle so our children can get that credit going forward. At the same time, the college would like to program 200 level classes, so basically the second year of an associate's program, with the long-term goal of being able to offer a program that students can leave high school with either an associate's or as close to an associate's as possible, depending upon how we can map out those classes. So the prospects are pretty exciting, and really the discussions are somewhat in their infancy, but moving along very quickly. We're going to have a survey that SUNY Ulster is going to put together that we'll use out in our high schools. I know the high school group is saying, wow, this is new information. It's brand new information as of today. So, and we'll look at feasibility as to whether or not that is a program that can be put together, first of all, by SUNY Ulster, and how many of our children will take advantage of something like that. The most exciting part of that is it would all be at the reduced tuition rate. So right now, it's a very, very inexpensive proposition to take a college class in high school. You get the high school credit for the high school course, and pancaked on top of that, you get the college credit. So we would be offering the college courses that we can't offer in the high school here in this school in late afternoon, evening courses at the reduced salary rate, tuition rate, and it seems like a win-win. So we're looking at putting together some real concrete information for our high school folks to look through with our guidance offers, with our guidance office, and also with our departments, and see where we can go with that. But it looks very promising, and I'm happy to report to the board that things are back on the rails, so to speak, as far as some potential future offerings. So very exciting.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
So right now, there's a ability for a high school student to get about 30 credits of college credits, 30 college credits right through the...
More than that.
Could be more,
Even more than that?
depending on APs and things like that.
So what does this now do? Increase that capability, or and potentially what, maybe even get as far as associate degrees?
Correct. So it would move to the 200 level and classes that we can't because of adjudication at the high school level. What they specifically will be, that's something that the college president is working on right now. But the idea would be to offer more college credits to high school kids in this region and not have to go over to Dutchess or up to Stone Ridge, the Stone Ridge campus for SUNY Ulster. So much simpler to just have to drive right down 9W and be able to take the class here. So.
But you're also talking about doing it nights and stuff, so it's while they're still in high school.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
potentially you could graduate in 4 years with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. Potentially.
That would be the goal.
Potentially,
Yes, that would be the
even
goal.
if
And
somebody doesn't go at that pace, but it's
Correct.
available to them.
I mean, that's a pretty rigorous assignment, but you know what? There's a pretty good chance that if this gets fashioned properly, you'll have some kids that are leaving here with an associate's degree walking into their, quote, freshman year of college, really potentially a second semester sophomore or a junior, depending upon the way that those courses get structured. Now, that's still some time for it to become that, but
Right,
that's
right,
the goal. So.
That's awesome.
Any other questions on that? Mr. Bacazzi, if you could just give an update on the phone system. I know as recently as today you've been working on some short-term patches and some long-term patches. So,
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Yes, we did attempt a repair today. Several avenues to get the present system more stable than it is. Unfortunately, all those efforts failed. So we had to put the old phone server back into place as it was. We do have quotes from Anise for our new updated phone system that we're going to pursue for install this summer, and we were just trying to stabilize our system really for the next 3 months. So we continue to review that. We're probably just a day or so away from finalizing those quotes, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Witherow to work with OU BOCES on a lease purchase for that new system. But we did make some efforts today, and unfortunately, they were not successful.
So could you give what are we looking at as far as frequency of outages and length of outages?
The outages happen, we see approximately 3 to 4 outages during the day, every day, and those outages last anywhere from 2 minutes to as high as 7 minutes. So that's what we see each day, and we're not sure what causes it. The system reboots itself, and sometimes it comes back very quickly, so that's the 2-minute mark. Other times it continues to reboot until it stabilizes, and that's usually the longest time is 7 minutes. But we know it's not an ideal situation. There is a cost to fix the present system, but it's just not my recommendation to spend that money if the current system can at least last until through the end of June and into July. Obviously, while we're installing the new one, we're still going to need a present system, but that's where we are at this time.
If we gave authorization to repair the existing system, how long would that take you to have the repair, which would basically be a new server for it, operational?
Yeah, the repair is actually taking, we have the same phone server in every one of our buildings, and they talk. So it would be taking a present phone server out of the Middle Hope building. Middle Hope is still operational. That school does use the system, but honestly, it's very few phones that operate there. So Northeast, who's our present company that supports this system, would take that server, bring it to the high school, reconfigure it so it runs everything it needs to run for the entire district operation, replace that unit at Middle Hope with a much smaller system. So that work probably could be done within a week's time, assuming that they had all the components and didn't need to order anything. So it would take about a week for them from ordering to completion, probably about a week's time. And that comes at a cost of, it's an estimated cost of $25,000. I understand, I mean, unfortunately, the buildings have gotten used to it. I know it's on the mind of all the administrators and building administrators when we see that system go ARS or it brings up an error code until that's restored, and it is troublesome. At this point, we know it comes back, and we simply haven't given the order to expend the $25,000 to repair a current system, knowing that in 3 months, it's July, and we're really looking to install a brand new IP phone system, which moves away from this, it's all newer technology, and it moves away from this current system we have.
I think we really need to put this on for when we get to either old business or new business, so we can have a real discussion about it. I know we talked about it Monday, Russell and I, and the safety committee did. I think we really should have an actual discussion about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. During that 2 to 7 minute time frame, if there is an emergency that happens, what's the course of action to reach
Yes.
emergency personnel?
Very good question, Mr. Conley. All of our buildings still have hard copper lines, what they used to refer to as POTS lines. So every principal and administrator has a red phone, and it is the color red that plugs into a hard line. There's also every one of our fax lines is a hard coded line. So phones can be plugged in and used to call out. Can't be done on a mass scale. So, for example, I attempted to repair the system in the middle of the day, and for several reasons, that was not the best idea. However, the buildings were prepared to enact those phones. We were going to communicate those phones. There's just no voicemail, so you would get that traditional busy signal and have to call back again to a building. The decision was made to delay that till this afternoon, And unfortunately, we're at the same place. But that's the internal infrastructure for emergencies, as well as there are a certain number of district-issued cell phones.
We'll talk about it in new business later on. Last two items for me. I'll come back to budget in just a second. I just want to put out there that you're talking about some kind of recognition for Patricia Russo, who's a former board president and board member for a long time. Did some early research, and the depth of information is difficult to come by. So what I'm actually going to request is if I could get a board member or two to help me out with a subcommittee, I guess, to see if we can do some research and spend some real time to not be hasty about coming up with something for someone that served the community for a long time, so we could sit down and just kind of, where can we get some information about Ms. Russo, and then what would be the appropriate way to recognize her for her service. So if there's someone that's interested in helping me out with that, I'd appreciate it. It'd just take a little bit of time to sit down and talk.
Yeah, I think we can get Mr. Sagarese. I'm sure would be more than happy to come meet with us one day. He was a superintendent for a long time during that period.
You also have Steve that served with her on the school board, Steve Amichek. I'm sure he would put some
Yeah.
Okay.
information on her.
What was that name?
Adam Check. They were all on the school board together.
Okay. Is there a board member that'd be interested in helping me out with that, just to?
Yeah.
Frank and Joanne? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, budget. A big focus for tonight is going to be a presentation we're going to hear from Mr. Hecht regarding the BOCES budget. So thank you very much for coming. Also, we're keeping a very close eye right now as we end March on what's happening in Albany. So there are certainly a number of moving parts related to budget. It's the annual shuffle back and forth between the Hudson Valley and Albany for our local legislators, and we stay in very close contact with Senator Larkin and Assemblyman Scartatos to make sure that they're understanding impact of legislation and budgetary implications of what's happening in Albany and how it impacts here in Marlborough. Certainly this year takes on a new flavor as it relates to safety and security, because there are a number of floating options from both the legislature and also the assembly regarding what schools and what Albany can do to help schools deal with school safety and security. So we're watching those things very, very closely. Would anticipate some closure and finality to not only a New York State budget, but also what legislation will come from safety and security perspectives. Should be by that April 1st deadline. It is the required deadline for adoption of the state budget. Knock on wood, they've met that deadline for a number of years now, but there was also a period of time back a few years where they blew past that budget deadline. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks and how that impacts Marlborough, because the impact could be substantial. And it certainly does have an impact on the dialogue that we're having. You'll see a minor adjustment in our presentation tonight. We captured a spot on our budget presentation that refers specifically to school safety and security. We have a safety committee that works periodically here in the district, but really have accelerated our meeting time to be weekly at this point, looking at what our current safety and security protocols are. And when we get to that part of the budget presentation, I have a document to hand out to the board that is a confidential internal document, because it specifically relates to building safety procedures that are not subject to public disclosure, but certainly enhancements that we're talking about that we did get some feedback from the public on, but we're also surveying our local police department and also our administrators do have budgetary implications. So we'll capture the dollar amount as a range, and certainly over the next couple of meetings, we'll fine-tune a recommendation for the board to consider as far as what we should or should not include in our budget as it relates to school safety and security. Mr. Witherell also has I guess I'm calling a layman's term approach to looking at what fund balance is and what it's not, so that he's an expert in the area of accounting and facts and figures, and really can dig us through all those. And sometimes some of us can glass over what those numbers really truly mean. So I asked and challenged Mr. Witherow to come up with a bird's eye view of really what is our financial picture, because we got a very strong financial picture from our auditor in the fall, and certainly in the early winter months, we had an improvement in our Standard & Poor's rating because of our financial picture. And I just want to make sure that the board is clear, and certainly the public here is clear on what our financial picture is, which is very strong, so that we can understand where we are in our 5-year plan as it relates to our development of the 18-19 budget. So Pat will address the board related to the budget as we start talking about the Orange Ulster budget and the Marlborough School budget. So with that, my report is done.
Thank you. So to highlight our evening, we have the Student of the Month, and I will let Mr. Brooks introduce the building principals.
Terrific. Let's start with the high school.
Good evening, everyone. We actually have a front man for the backstage crew, the set crew, Augustine Valentino, who's a junior. He's going to be rushing back from this meeting and changing into clothing where you can't see him backstage to assist with everything. So in addition to all the things you're going to hear about tonight, Augustine also manages a crew of anywhere from 10 to 16 students per night in getting him set up to put everything together for the play. So at this time, I'm going to ask Augustine, Ms. Caitlin Brady, his teacher, and Mr. Bruce Cordolano to introduce Augustine Valentino.
I'm not going to say a whole lot about Augustine. I want to leave Miss Brady to do that. But I will say this. We always come across students in our time. What this young man did about a month and a half ago to me, when he came to my attention with a situation, Augustine, you're one of the most kindest, genuine persons I've met in a long time. And I sincerely mean that. You're a good friend to that kid, and you have to understand that. And I was very proud of you for what you did, and I won't forget that. You're a good man. Now, Mrs. Brady, would you please?
Okay. I promised it might be quick because I know he wants to get out of here. It's my pleasure, first of all, to introduce Augustine Valentino as our 11th grade student of the month, and I've had the pleasure of knowing him since he was a freshman. He excels in academics, and he's always willing to go the extra mile to improve his work or to expand his learning. He's involved in so many clubs. Drama is one of them. He's in National Honor Society, and he's also one of our 11th grade Link Crew leaders. He was recently nominated for the National Technical Honor Society over at CTEC, and he assumes leadership roles in all the clubs that he is a part of. He is the set crew chief, I always mess that up, I'm sorry, for the drama club. He's played very integral roles for both the fall play, The Birds, and the spring musical, Into the Woods. He attends CTEC, and he studies the Vet Tech program. And he is very passionate about animals, and he is such a loving, kind person. He loves raising chickens and ducks, which is very interesting. And I also have chickens, so we have great conversations about our chickens. And he has a wealth of knowledge in this area. He has shown maturity, and he balances school, all of his extracurricular activities, and he also works locally in the community. So with that, congratulations, Augustine, and keep on working.
Take a picture right here in front of us, so we just slide over. And you'll be right.
Take it as an opportunity for an advertisement also. We've got Into the Woods beginning tonight, tomorrow night, Saturday and Sunday, so if you don't have your tickets already, please make sure that you make your arrangements to get tickets, but you can also get them at the door, correct? Yes, so fantastic show, looking forward to it. Let's go to the middle school next.
Good evening, everyone. As you may remember from previous years, March is Music in Our Schools Month. So our March Student of the Month is represented, it comes from our music department. So I'd like to, at this time, invite up Denny Menendez, who is our Student of the Month, to be represented here by Miss Fu, his instrumental teacher, and Miss Garcia, his choral teacher.
Hello, so Denny has been a complete pleasure to have in class, which is great because I luckily have him in both my chorus class and general music class. And after witnessing Denny's work ethic and desire to help others, it became very clear to me how he deserved to be Student of the Month. And Denny is not only a skilled musician, but also a kind and hardworking leader in the classroom. To give context to this, one sweet moment in our general music classroom, all of a sudden the students completely agreed that Denny should run for president one day because they also noticed his actions in the classroom. And so I just want to say thank you for all your hard work, Denny, and for extending your hand to help those around you. Your teachers and classmates appreciate everything you do.
So what I have to say echoes a lot of what Ms. Garcia said. When Denny and I met in January, he had impressed me with his outgoing demeanor and the number of instruments he played before telling me that he really likes to play percussion. As a percussionist, he has taken initiative in both band and lessons to be a helpful hand and leader. Denny is always willing to help his peers when they are unsure, play the parts that are the most intimidating, and challenge himself to play more music. Denny also demonstrates a humble attitude. He does not brag about his accomplishments and abilities and will ask questions if he's unsure of something. One of my favorite memories of Denny doesn't have to do with the music classroom. It was seeing him in scrubs on career day during Spirit Week. Admittedly, my first thought was, that's an impressive amount of blue. But that passed when Denny explained that he was dressed as a surgeon. That's right? A surgeon? Of course, a student that is so eager to assist others and challenge himself would pick a career that would entail helping people and academic vigor. Denny Menendez is an exemplary student who is both compassionate and hardworking. He has been picked as Student of the Month during Music in Our Schools Month because he demonstrates what we hope to cultivate in a music program. Students with an enthusiasm for music who support each other in order to create a moment that is shared with their community.
Bob Denny.
And Mrs. Walsh will go to the elementary school.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Music in the Schools Month, our Student of the Month for March. We're very excited. Before I introduce our Student of the Month, Giovanni Filicello, and his nominating teacher, Mrs. Groth, I want to just tell you a quick story about yesterday when we had a lockdown drill, as we do 4 times a year, part of state protocols. I want to let you know how it goes in an elementary school of almost 900 students, 130-something staff, 40 classrooms, and how important it is that we drill and practice and participate in all of these safety precautions always. Yesterday, as we were clearing the rooms, the police officers and I, we stepped into the restrooms and we check to make sure that no one's there, that everyone's clear, and that they know everything is safe once everything is deemed safe. And I saw a feet up. So I called in and said, "Is everyone okay?" And I heard a little voice, and someone was in there. And I identified myself, the police did, and Giovanni Filicello identified himself. So he internalized the lessons learned and kept himself calm, cool, and collected and safe, and we are so proud of this fine young man in his handsome suit. So come on up, Giovanni, so Mrs. Groth can talk about you.
Mr. Boyd and I unanimously agreed within half a second who our Student of the Month should be. I'm going to read first what Mr. Boyd has to share. He is currently performing in the pit band for Into the Woods, otherwise he would most certainly be here. But their first performance is this evening. Mr. Boyd wishes he could be here tonight, however, he is playing for the high school musical Into the Woods. These are his thoughts to be read about Giovanni. He says, "I'm very proud and honored to be able to present to you Giovanni Filicello as MES Student of the Month. Giovanni is a very talented musician. He's accomplished as a pianist and a tenor saxophone player. Giovanni performed in the All-County Band Festival this past weekend. He sat in the first seat, having scored higher than any other tenor saxophone student from the entire Ulster County, as a fifth grader competing against sixth graders, by the way. He is only one of 3 students from this school to have participated in the festival. To be selected for this highly competitive band is an honor and quite an accomplishment, and Giovanni was the best tenor sax player from the county." Giovanni is kind, helpful, polite, smart, and very talented. He works very hard in his shows and his accomplishments. He's a leader in the 5th grade and is an encouragement for his peers. I always see Giovanni with a smile on his face and surrounded by friends. I will watch with great pride as he excels through his school years. I know this is just the beginning of his successes, and I wish him the very best. Congratulations, Giovanni. Now, I have to put my 2 cents in. I would like to add that Giovanni's work, dedication, and talent on piano is truly unique. He has only been taking piano lessons for about a year. His favorite musical style is classical, and he enjoys Beethoven sonatas and Chopin piano works the most. I asked him what he likes most about music, and he answered, being able to express my emotions. This year, he has joined chorus as our rehearsal accompanist, where his duties include playing for our warm-ups, playing the parts as the children learn to sing them, and pointing out when I miss the B-flat, and otherwise reading my mind. He will even be accompanist for one of our concert selections in our May performance, which is a huge thing for a 5th grader to do at a performance accompanying for the choir, so hats down. Giovanni also enjoys math because he says it's not boring and there's always a problem to solve. He is kind, respectful to all, very deserving of Student of the Month, and I'm going to ask that you all indulge me for 30 seconds as I share just the recording of Giovanni on the piano. Oh, hold on. Volume up.
Giovanni, your work is going to be out on the internet now because these meetings are recorded, so that's on YouTube within the next couple of days. So, you know, each meeting when we talk about our students of the month and families, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Certainly, Augustine and Denny and Giovanni, we're very proud of you. When I hear things like, I'm the set crew chief and I manage a staff and I excel at academics, I'm a leader or I'm a percussionist and I'm humble and I am an honored band member in the county. I have the confidence to tell a teacher that she's off key. That's really what he said. Something about a B flat. And they love math. I mean, this is what it means to be a Duke. Thank you so much, families, for sharing your kids with us. They're great people. They're examples of what we want everyone to be every single day. So congratulations to our students of the month. Thank you, families. And I appreciate you coming out tonight for this. So thank you.
We will give the families a few minutes to get your children home and back to work. So we'll take a couple-minute recess. Thank you. Then I'm going to go ahead and read it and then motion to authorize. Which I mean, that part of it's fine. I'm just trying for the procedural part. I'm trying to understand. I'm going to get a motion to adopt this resolution for us to be the lead agency, and then I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution. I'm going to read the whole thing. Okay. And then, yeah. Okay. But I can't do it. Oh, okay. Well, that's true. I didn't know if I had to get it because it's not on the agenda for them to. Okay. All right. So talented, Francine.
Well, at least he doesn't.
Any of that. I just have to read it because it's actually right here.
Well, just to get it on as an item.
I know, he said I don't have to do that.
Okay.
That's what I said. I said, no, I have to get a motion to.
To add it as a.
And he said, no.
Well, you're gonna make the motion. Yeah, you just make the motion and somebody else second it. That's all. Then that would way you would avoid it. Yes.
I saw the motion that day, either way, I have to read it. Can I walk by?
Right. Oh, yeah. Hey, believe me, we don't have much else there, so it's fine.
I can't see, Liz can't see that.
Why?
Because he's reading this is regular business, and he forgot out there, so I'm constantly.
Well, don't look out there, just read. They're all blurry. They're not going to know the difference.
So, yeah, I had someone tell me that Mr. Mayor, I was putting.
Yeah.
She doesn't camp and she tells me she's going to change.
Which is good.
Yeah, we'll see if a fourth person puts it in.
Oh, well, Carson's putting in. With that?
I don't think so.
We will move on to budget presentations with Mr. Patrick Witherow. Yes.
Yeah, Pat, why don't
Go
you
ahead.
introduce? Yep.
Yeah.
We can take a nap after this one.
So I'm gonna defer on my presentation to Orange Ulster BOCES. Orange Ulster BOCES budget vote is coming up on April 19th, correct? So they are here to present the information on their administrative and program budgets. Okay, so Mr. Hecht from Orange Ulster BOCES. Thank you.
So before I begin, I just want to introduce my team that came with me this evening, and I'll start on the aisle with Mr. Bill Boss, who is one of our board members, represents Greenwood Lake, and also is our legislative liaison as well for Orange County Schools. Next to Bill is Jean Pavek. Jean is our vice president to the cooperative board. Next to Jean, and she will be up here momentarily, is our assistant superintendent for finance, Deborah McBride Heppes. And then next to her is Mr. Larry Berger, who is the president of the Cornwall board and a cooperative board member for BOCES as well. So we're going to stay on task because I know you have plenty to do this evening. And one of the things I wanted to do was just commend you for being recognized on a high-performing district in Ulster County. And it's easy to see why, based on the students this evening and based on the discussion that you're having with regard to curriculum and programs for students. So that's truly amazing. So congratulations on the work that you do. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I'm going to take you through the administrative budget handout that I just gave you. So we'll go step by step, but we're going to stay on task, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of the things. And I'm going to start with the front page and just those important dates. If you look at the important dates on the top left, you've got April 4th, which is our board dinner, where we present the budget as well at the Career Technical Education Center. April 5th is our BOCES annual meeting. And then on April 19th, Patrick already had mentioned it, April 19th is our BOCES budget vote, where you will vote on our candidates for the cooperative board. Jean Pavek is actually one of those candidates as well. She's been nominated. And you also have Mike Bello, who represents the Port Jervis School District as well. So they're both on the slate for board members. And then that evening, you'll also vote on our administrative budget that we'll talk about this evening. Next to that, you have a letter from Dorothy Slattery, our president. She was unable to be with us this evening, but sends her regards to you. And I just want to highlight some of the points in her letter. You can read that at your leisure. But we value you as a partner in helping together with the students that we share. You'll also see that we've developed programs with your support over the years, and they've actually come from discussions around our administrative tables with the superintendents as well as our directors, and it's really blossomed into programs like the newcomer program, which I'll talk about a little later, and then the Marguerite Flood High School and middle school programs at the Arden Hill campus. So I am actually going to end there for now and bring up Deborah Heppes to go through some of the numbers with you in our administrative budget. No, you're fine. You're the numbers person.
So I'm going to bring you to the second page of the handout. So you've heard me year after year probably say a very similar spiel of what I'm going to share with you tonight. As you know, the BOCES budget is broken into three parts. We have the admin budget, rental and capital, and our program budgets. So our program budgets is what you choose to send your awesome students to. We heard tonight about one of our great shared CTEC students. So those are the programs that the students choose and you choose to send to BOCES. Then there's the admin and rental pieces, which is not a choice. You're in the club, and everybody pays their fair share of those pieces. So the admin budget is the piece that you'll be voting on later in April. So let's start with that. So the admin budget for us is a separate budget. It is identical to your admin budget, which is the beginning codes in your budget document that Patrick shares with you. So it covers the cost of the superintendent's office, salaries and benefits, and supplies and contractual commitments. It also covers our assistant superintendent for instructions office, our HR office, and my business office. So very similar, like I said, to your budget. So I'm sure, Patrick's already seen this document. We reviewed it at a meeting recently, and of course, he went right to the 8.98% increase. But I'm going to start by focusing on the 1.73% increase. So the 1.73% increase is the increase in what I just shared with you, the increase in our admin budget. And we're very, we spend a lot of time on this budget. We're very much aware of your constraints and your building your budgets and your 2% tax cap. We do not have a 2% tax cap. We don't levy taxes. But we certainly function and operate as if we do, because you're our customer, and therefore we then feel that we need to keep within the same constraints that you. So we work hard to keep that portion of our admin budget below the 2%. And so that covers our admin salaries, support staff, equipment, supplies, some contractual, and the benefits, and internal COSR charges. So this is the only language that is different from your budget. So when you purchase BOCES services, I'll give you an example, risk management, or Michael knows technology, right? You have those as line items. We, as the BOCES, also purchase those services from ourselves, if you will. So the admin budget transfers the charges to those other program budgets. So that's that line item. So we purchase risk management for ourselves. We purchase a piece of technology, and that covers our portion of operations and maintenance also. So it's an internal charge. So that total is 1.73%. The other requirement that we have from the State Education Department in regards to our admin budget is that all retiree health insurance be budgeted in the admin budget. So not just folks that retired out of admin. Every single person that retires from Orange Ulster BOCES gets paid out of the program budgets, but when they retire, their benefits are paid out of the admin budget. And and I'm always whining to SED that that's not fair, look what it makes my numbers look like, as opposed to if that was just within the entire budget looking at the percentage. So they explained to me years ago that it truly is an accounting function. So in our world at BOCES, programs come and some programs go, right? Over time, things change and we offer different programs. So if you worked for the last 30 years in a particular program and now you're retired and that program no longer exists, I would have nowhere to pay those retiree benefits, health insurance out of. So as an accounting function, it's all kept in one place. Right here in the admin budget that gets voted on. So I know you hear my sarcasm, but it's something that is in all of our budgets. It just happens to be with our admin budget alone. So let's talk about the retiree health insurance. So we are budgeting for 426 retirees for next year, which includes 31 new retirees, which is almost double of new retirees from this current year. We're seeing that years ago when BOCES really grew, we're seeing that growth starting to retire. So our retirement numbers are going up. So you'll see the 8.98%, which is our overall admin budget, includes the 31 new retirees added to the existing budget, as well as a 7% increase in the premium, which is identical to what you're budgeting in your budget, because as Patrick and I sit on the Orange Ulster Health Plan board together and work very hard to keep the benefits for all of our retirees and employees at a great level while trying to manage the best we can in regard to the finances. I will report our health plan is doing wonderful. It's very healthy. We had little bumps in the road over the last 2 years. If you remember, we saw a larger increase last year, an 18% increase in the health insurance. And the plan is doing wonderful. We're able to keep our benefits stable. We're not looking to change any benefits for next year. And we are looking at a 7% increase in that. That's already voted on, so that's a done deal. So that is the explanation for the increase. The 9% increase is, for the most part, retiree health insurance. Any questions there? Okay, I'm going to flip to the next page then. Next page is the rental and capital budgets. So as you know, we rent space in other locations for our BOCES programs. And then we also, this is the piece of our budget where we're able to budget for some not very exciting capital projects. So you'll see in the middle of the page there, wastewater infrastructure replacement. It cannot get any more exciting than that. But I will tell you that that is a project for our Gibson Road campus, so our main campus in Goshen. And we are in desperate need of replacing that. And it's a project that's going to be over $1 million. And we have been budgeting for that over several years. So you'll see current year we put $550,000 aside for that, and then we're looking at another $150,000. So we have one more budget cycle that we're going to grab some money from the capital to complete the funding for that project, and we'll get that going next summer. And that's, again, that will take care of all those issues at our Gibson Road campus. The other one that we're looking at is a capital is the chiller cooling tower replacement at the Arden Hill campus. So again, not too exciting, both extremely important. So the total increase is 2.69% for capital and rental. Any questions on that? So one thing I can point out in regard to the capital in lieu of rental for Chester. So you'll notice that the Chester, there's a lease payment up top in the top box, and then the rental in lieu of. So the lease for the Chester Learning Center in Chester, which is the old Chester High School, is a $401,000 lease. And over the years, they've split some of it for the money to go back into the building. So that's what the in lieu of was. And for next year, that's not the case. There won't be any money going back in the building. It'll be just a full lease payment to Chester. So that dollar amount didn't change. It's just where it's budgeted. Okay, and then on the back sheet, if I can move along, no questions. On the back sheet is what we all know, all of our acronyms in education. This one is RWADA, Resident Weighted Average Daily Attendance. So this methodology is developed by the State Education Department so that we can allocate the admin, rental, and capital budgets to our component school districts on a fair and equitable basis. So it's basically a larger school like Monroe Woodbury would have a higher RWADA than a smaller school like Tuxedo, and therefore pay a larger proportionate share. So that's what that chart shows. Any questions there?
Why do they use, I mean, it's bad enough state ed does it. Why are we using such outdated numbers?
It's a great question. So if we go back, so we can't use the current year because we're not done yet. We can't use last year because it's not audited yet. So I went back and checked our records because I will tell you some BOCES do use last year's number. And we have never used last year's number because years ago we had trouble with some of the audited figures from the district. So it has stayed consistent.
So we always go back at least 2 years?
We always go back absolutely 2 years. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Heck, where'd you go?
I'm back.
All right, there you go.
I had your back.
All right, I feel it, I feel it.
All right, so I'm going to take you back to the center section. And I want to emphasize, too, I mean, if you go through this and you have questions, please feel free to contact us. We'll be able to happily answer those questions. And I know I emphasized the April 19th date. If anyone from the board wishes to come to that dinner, there's still time for that to occur. You can talk about that later as well. But just in terms of the programs that I referenced earlier, you've got two stories there about our Career and Tech Center in terms of work-based learning, which provides opportunities for students that are enrolled in our career tech programs, those students that we share between us. They have opportunities to go out in the field and gain experience day-to-day, hands-on, and those are through contracts that we have with some of the businesses and the organizations, the health care industry as well. So those are things that we provide for the students to enrich their experiences as well. And then on the next page, it's to the right, you'll see the translation services. This is something new within the last couple of years. We had conversations about this at the superintendent's tables with certainly the diverse populations that we have throughout our districts. There's a lot of native language speakers that we need to address as well in terms of communication, letters that go home. So we were able to put together a cadre of individuals who can translate. And if districts need that service, that was something that were coming to us and saying, we need help with this, to translate letters that are going home or for various things. So this is a service that we were able to put together. It was envisioned around the superintendent's tables and at other tables, administrative tables in the region, and this is something that has just taken off for us. I mentioned earlier the newcomer program, which is at Arden Hill. That came as a discussion around the tables as well. When we come together, there was a need for that. It was a program that we put together, and that continues to grow. And the other is the Marguerite Flood program, which started at the Director of Pupil Personnel Services table, and conversations happen there, and that's really what we do. If you need something, if districts, one or two, or actually two or more districts need a service, we're able to put that together, get those things approved through SED, and provide opportunities for students. And one of the greatest things actually with the Arden Hill campus is we're able to bring students back to the area and service them in the area. And that program continues to grow day by day. So we certainly appreciate your support and your help with that, and we look forward to April 19th, and hopefully we'll see some of you on the 4th as well. Any questions for me? We're good? So again, I want to thank you, and the board wishes to thank you. Deborah and I thank you for the invitation to come speak. It's kind of old home week for me. I started my career as a special education teacher upstairs in the hallways and in the classrooms. So it's a great opportunity to come back and just reconnect with folks. So again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming tonight, too. We appreciate you taking the night out and coming out and visiting us, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue on and go through an updated budget presentation. So the numbers have not changed from the last presentation. We do have a couple new things to look at. So right now, the proposed budget, $57.6 million. It's a 1.52% increase over the previous year, $864,000 increase in expenses. You got that right, Mark? 1.52. The tax levy has been set. We did submit our calculation to the comptroller's office. This is the final maximum, our tax cap under the 2% tax law. And that is an increase of 2.45%. a little bit over $830,000 increase in the levy from the previous year. And this is again, the first increase in the levy in 4 years. The last 3 years, we've seen consecutive decreases in the levy, and so we finally see an opportunity for some growth in the levy. Just a brief graphical representation of what our tax levy history looks like. You can see, obviously, a significant drop going into the 13-14 school year with the bankruptcy of Dynegy, the closing of this building and Middle Hope, and significant reduction in staff. Although we did see that drop, we continue to see increases in the tax rates, because even though expenses dropped, we saw a significant drop in value of the district and a loss of tax revenue from the power plants, which unfortunately shifted that burden over to the taxpayers. But we've seen a significant flattening of that rate over the last several years as the drop in value of the remaining plant, Roaston, which continues to decrease in value, that has experienced its largest drops in the first couple of years and has really leveled off. Last year was a $15 million drop, which we all know the town of Newburgh failed to address. And then this year, I think it's about a $3.5 million drop in value going to next year. So we don't see as significant of a shift anymore. Most of that devaluation has occurred already. So again, the major cost drivers for what was originally our rollover budget. Right now, we don't have any proposed expansion of program. We see salaries and payroll associated costs about $430,000. Health insurance, $100,000. As Ms. Heppes has mentioned, we did have a 7% increase in the health insurance rates. Fortunately, we've got a little bit of a break because of what we budgeted last year. With the 18% increase, we had a little carryover, which helps offset some of that increased expense this year. ERS and TRS have both increased their contribution rates. So every year, ERS is the employee retirement system for non-certificated personnel. TRS, the teacher retirement system, which is certificated personnel. Every year, the state determines what our contribution rate is going to be based on returns from the plan, so that they can keep the insurance or the retirement benefits in a cash positive situation going forward. So we did see a significant increase in the ERS and TRS expenses. Transportation, although we have a contractual 1.75% increase in our transportation rates with Quality Bus, we've seen enough of consolidation of services and just efficiencies in combining routes and doing what we can do to push anywhere we could to BOCE shared services through transportation, which Quality also runs. So even though we have a contractual increase in our rate, we're projecting about a $70,000 increase in the overall cost. And BOCE services, again, we've seen some favorable movement. There are increases in the cost of BOCE services, but we have some changes in the student profile, which gave us a little bit of relief, allowed us to grow into some of that savings, so we don't see a significant increase, just $32,000 increase on BOCE services, which is totals probably about $5 million in services that we purchase. And then we added, for this presentation, potential school safety enhancements. Mr. Brooks is going to speak to that. We don't have a specific dollar value because there's a number of options that are available that Mr. Brooks will elaborate on.
So I gave the board a confidential draft of school safety enhancements. That's the document that we're using to track with our safety team the options that we have in front of us as a team, and eventually that's going to turn into a dialogue with, as I stated earlier, this Board of Education for financing. So there's a range there of anywhere from zero if we implement nothing new to upwards of $350,000 if we take a number of the possible options and implement them for the next school year. So over the next two board meetings, so we have 2 meetings in April, and at the end of April, that's when we adopt a budget for presentation to the voters. We'll need to grapple with what things are we going to add and what things are we not going to add. To help the board in that process, obviously the memo you have in front of you is part of that, but this will eventually pare down to a recommendation from our safety team, which is comprised of
a couple of board members, some representatives from our local police department, and also from our administrative staff, we'll come up with a recommendation of where we think we should go as it relates to enhancements of our safety procedures. So this is certainly something for you to chew on over the next couple of weeks, and I anticipate having more dialogue at the, as it relates to dollars and cents at our April meeting, the first meeting of April. Our next school safety team meeting is Monday. So the team is getting together Monday morning to review and kind of fine-tune which way are we going to go. In addition, to help fill our knowledge base, I, along with Mr. Malazzo, attended the Ulster County school safety team, which really comprises of police chiefs, state police representatives, sheriff's representatives, and school district superintendents. We met this morning. That meets every month. And certainly school security was top on the list. Actually, the discussion was all about school safety and enhancement. So every district in the region is really grappling with these matters. So if I could, I'd ask the board to spend some time reviewing that document. And it's a discussion document. There is no item that should be off the list as far as discussion items for us to review as a safety team. But as I said, it also is a private document because it relates specifically to the safety procedures that are building specific. So it's not something that is subject to public disclosure, because we certainly don't want our specific plans out there in the public realm. But the dollars and cents associated with any increases would be. If you recall, also a question was asked, what do we currently spend on safety and security? So we took the costs of all of our SRO expenses that we have to pay for, monitors, and even we put in lunch recess aides, because they certainly work on the safety and security of our children, and our greeter staff. And it was upwards of $370-something thousand is currently what we pay for those related or associated costs. So. Understand that as far as process goes, and okay, good. Thank you.
I would assume we also, that probably that dollar figure doesn't capture the SROs that are provided through the town's intermunicipal agreement, right? Right. So we also have two other SROs and a traffic enforcement officer, or one other SRO, I'm sorry, and a traffic enforcement officer that are part, they provide services to offset an agreement with the town regarding the occupation of this building. So again, nothing's changed, just a reiteration of our breakdown in revenue. We do see, it's easier for me to just read it off here. Even though the paper likes to project that, you know, we're going to see additional state aid monies, we projected about a $51,000 decrease in state aid compared to the governor's proposal, but netting out to about a $29,000 decrease. We have a proposal for about $235,000 additional appropriation of reserves in our fund balance. The pilot's going up slightly, and again, we see the significant portion of the increase in revenue from the allowable increase in our tax levy for this year. Reserves, so we talked about, you know, what would we need to have our tax levy be if we only use the estimated revenue against our proposed expenditures. And so our tax levy to support the budget would be about $38.7 million. Our levy limit is $34.7 million. So we have roughly $4 million of appropriated reserves and fund balance to provide a balanced budget going forward.
Before you go off that slide, Pat, of that 3.9, about how much do you anticipate is rolled over from our excess from this year? I think that's the confusing part.
Well, I'm gonna highlight
Yeah,
that.
but you get to that next chart, there's so many numbers.
Okay, so we would project that we would be utilizing, I believe it was about 1.6 million of that 3.9. So 2.3 million roughly. As we've talked about previously, there's contingent expenses that arise. We could have families move into the district that have specific needs that are very potentially very costly. We need to have the flexibility to be able to provide those services when those types of expenses arise. So when we say we're going to appropriate that $4 million in fund balance, we budget to about 96% of our expected expenses. So that 2.3 million is the 4%, which we appropriate with the expectation that we're not going to spend it. But it's there if we need to spend it, if any type of situation arises where we do.
If I could, just in simple terms, not the accounting terms of appropriation, $1.6 million is what we expect to use out of fund balance in the 18-19 school year.
Correct.
It
So,
looks like 3.9, but it's actually expected to only be 1.6 to use, and the other 2.3 returns back to the bank.
correct. It's kind of like having an emergency fund at your home. If you've got a little emergency fund that sits there, you know it's available to use. If you have to use it, it's there. If you don't have to use it, it remains there. It's just for us, we do it on an annual basis. So we fund our emergency fund, so to speak, and whatever we don't use gets returned, and then we refund it again. A couple of years ago, that was part of what we would build into our tax levy. We are now in a cash position where it's not necessary for us to do that, so we're using our own reserves or our own bank account, so to speak, to cover any types of those contingent expenses.
Hey, Pat, as a follow-on to Frank's question, you baked in a certain amount of expected, I'll call it surplus, for lack of a better term, from last year's budget. What do you see? What was that from last year, and what are you seeing us track? How are we tracking against that number this year?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but we could definitely include that in the next board meeting's presentation. I can give you an up-to-date presentation on that. We don't expect to spend all of it. This year, we do expect to run a deficit, so we do expect for our expenses to exceed our revenue because we have the $1.2 million shortfall in tax collection due to the clerical error on the Newburgh Roaston Power Plant assessment.
Okay.
And so everybody understands.
But how would we run a deficit if we're planning on only going to 96%? That's greater than 1.2.
Just because, well, I guess if you count our reserves and appropriated fund balance, we should be okay. But overall, at the end, where this year I say we'd expect to only spend 1.6 million of the reserves, whatever that number was for this year, that's for next year, whatever that number was for this year, we have to add in 1.2 million on top of that because it's 1.2 million of tax revenue that we expected to receive that we're not going to receive. So there's potential that we could break even with our reserves and fund balance that have been appropriated, but that 1.2 million was not an intended figure. We expected to raise 34 million in tax revenue, not 32.8. So we are going to have 1.2 million less collected.
We start, and let's use round numbers, $50 million.
Right.
And you figured you were going to use 96% of that. So we anticipated having X dollars left over.
Correct.
We know that X dollars should only be 1.2 less, unless we had a larger expense than we planned.
I don't expect to have a larger expense than we planned, but I do expect to have less revenue collection than we planned.
By 1.2 million.
Correct. So I'll give you an updated projection for next year, or for next meeting.
I think that this slide that you put together addresses it.
Right, well so we'll go to the next slide. So here's a historical review of what our fund balance use has looked like. And just to run through the numbers, the top number is the actual budget dollar amount for the year. Below that was the tax levy that was associated with that. Then we had the assigned fund balance, that's the reserves and fund balance that we appropriated, that we plan to spend each year. And then below you see what our fund balance was at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. So you'll see the end of the year fund balance jumps and it becomes the beginning of year fund balance for the next year. So we went from 8.4 to 6.1, 6.1 to 7.2, 7.2 to 11.1, 11.1 to 13.4, this is last year, 16, 17. Last year, we were within $90,000 of our expenses balancing against our revenue. So we saw an increase of $90,000. And then our projection for right now for next year would be a decrease in our overall fund balance and reserves because we're planning to spend $1.2 million of that money because we're not collecting it from the tax revenue side. And then I just wanted to note that both the 17-18 and 18-19 budgets are somewhat artificially inflated by $1 million because we have $1 million worth of Smarter Schools Bond Act spending included in there, but we also have an offsetting $1 million worth of revenue budgeted. So it's a net zero sum, but you know, if we removed the $1 million, you would see that where those budgets would be $1 million less than what it shows on the paper. So once we finally get approval and we're finally able to spend that money, that will correct itself. Does that help? I mean, so right there, we plan to spend a certain amount of reserves and fund balance, and now we're going to plan to spend about $1.2 million more than what we initially anticipated because we have the shortfall on the tax collection side. And what that looks like in terms of a deficit or a surplus, I can give you a more detailed presentation at the next meeting.
The detailed chart, I guess, let's go, because I think that gets to your question.
Next one? Or this one? Okay. So, all right.
So it's a little bit difficult to see because of the way that the projector projects, so let me make it larger. At the last meeting, we talked about the bottom line. Can you work on that? We talked about how much money do we have in the bank. And if you recall, this box was the red box. And the number was down relatively low, $500,000 or $600,000.
$500,000.
Pat and I had a long talk because sometimes the dialogue gets into some wonky terms that are difficult for us lay people to really truly understand if you're not an accountant. So I said, I want to know how much do we have at the beginning of the year compared to the end of the year in our bank. Because I remember big numbers, 13 million at the beginning of the school year from our accountant. And that number is captured on this chart.
Up over there, yeah.
Chart there. But the bottom line is, each year, we're pulling some money that we're expecting to spend from fund balance, but returning more into the account at the end of the year that we don't spend because we don't have an emergency expenditure. So our true balance in the bank at the end of all of our obligations each year, and this was that year that was the $500,000 low limit, it's $5.38 million.
Sorry.
Because it takes into account.
7.7 would be the total bank.
Okay, right, because the reserves is 5.3.
Correct.
Because Pat was accounting for only the.
I wasn't accounting for restricted cash. I was accounting for assigned and unassigned cash. And so when the superintendent asked me, he said, no, look, we need the bigger picture. And it's the way we've been doing it for years, looking at that. He said, I want to know where we are, what's the balance at the beginning of the year, what's the balance at the end of the year. And that's where we kind of walked through. We talked with the auditor. He said, no, you're perfectly fine looking at the total number in there. And so these are the.
Assigned fund balances really are there. You could pay, we leave money there, but you could pay that true expense for that year out of the assigned fund balance and not out of the budget.
And that's what we do. So
Yeah.
there is a mechanism,
Yeah.
right?
So it's really available, because I don't want anybody to think that because it's assigned, it's not like it's in a CD you can't touch.
No.
Because it's an actual expense that we're making, we can dip into that all the time, and
that's
you do,
the-
and you put it back.
Yeah, and that's what they actually, the state comptrollers actually want you to do that even though the net effect at the end is the same, they want you to spend that assigned so you don't spend other money. Instead, at the end of the year, after you've expended all of that, whatever surplus you have, you then can refund those same types of reserves. So it's really just.
Look at it from that broader perspective. At the end of the day, you've got fund balance and reserves, and then a total. So at the end of that difficult year, remember we talked for years now about a soft landing. That soft landing really happens in this school year, whereas the last time the red box it was $500 and some thousand. We'll have in the bank after all obligations are met $7.7 million. So again, our financial structure is very strong.
Yeah,
That's
and then
why our
S&P.
Standard & Poor's rating increased. So our cash position, our bank position, our obligations, very strong. So that's really the takeaway from it. All the numbers back it up. It's important that this is part of it because the numbers have to be transparent. But that box right there is the important box, is the takeaway compared to what we discussed at the last meeting.
And in 4 weeks, we may know if we've recouped a quarter or a third of that lost money.
Correct.
We have been working very hard with Senator Larkin and Assemblyman Scarpatos and have special legislation on our behalf presented by them to the state to recoup some of that money. What we end up with depends upon what the governor ends up signing off on. So it'd be premature for me to say the amount because you never know what the governor signs. But we anticipate working multi-years with them and have a commitment that they will continue to work on it. It's a both house proposal. So we're confident that we're going to get something. What we're going to get, we'll know by April 1st. So thank you for highlighting that because it's an important element.
Yeah.
The money back.
And you do see after that year where we start to drop the $500,000 in debt, the next year we have a drop in $1.2 million in debt. That $1.2 million was a tax cert, so there's no loss in any building aid associated with that loss of debt. So that's a true bottom line saving. So after that year, you see the numbers start again decline. So again, that's the low trough, and then we start to climb up. And I did pass out to everybody page 20 of the last year's audit report, which backs up the total fund balance, the total money in the bank. It's a little bit different than my number because it's got an encumbrance included in there, and my number I'm able to utilize too. I do appropriate some of the restricted cash against the debt service. So that's why you'll see a slight discrepancy between my 14.1 million and what's listed on the sheet there.
Hey, Pat, one question too. Is last meeting I asked about what your budget growth assumptions were in what one of these charts, might have been the same one. Now I see, I thought you said 2%. Now I see budget numbers, growth numbers projected less than that. Is there, did I miss?
Where is that?
On the bottom line.
Oh, well,
budget growth.
That's the expense grows by 2%, but it doesn't, you also have changes in revenue. Also this year too, in this projection where you see the 0.09%, that's assuming we get approval of our Smarter Schools Bond Act, and I'm able to drop that $1 million worth of expense that I'm carrying right now. I'll also lose the $1 million worth of revenue, but that's why you see from this budget to this budget, it doesn't look like that much of growth, but there's actually $1 million added to whatever growth you see there, because that would be that Smarter Schools Bond Act money.
Got it.
And then again, we looked at where we would be if we did not have the roasting error. So we're at 7.7 to 8.9, $1.2 million difference. Can you push that back and just? So I'll go back real quick just to hit the other. This is the same slide as before. This just shows because the error was made in roasting, and that 1.2 million shortfall that we are not going to collect, in essence, what we did was take $1.2 million from our bank and returned it to all the taxpayers, the net effect of what happened with that assessment error. So this year, the 17, 18, what the levy increase, what the tax increases look like, we're negative for Marlboro and Plattekill, a reduction in the tax rate and a slight increase in Newburgh. Even with the slight increase, we expected the tax bills to be lower because they also had growth in the overall value of the district. What it should have been was a 3.6% increase, again, attributed solely to the depreciation, or not depreciation, but the reduction in the taxable assessed value of the roasting facility. So this will correct itself in the 18-19 school year. So we walk through the numbers. Just a summary of what we've already seen. Again, we see our expected budget growth 1.52% with a corresponding 1.52% in revenues. our three-part budget comparison. This is our legally required format for presenting the budget to the voters, so we'll present this every time we do a presentation. And then again, the variable and options. We talked about the Smarter School Bond Act money. We'll await the final state aid amounts. We continue to be optimistic about potential retirements and the savings of breakage. Breakage being the difference between a senior employee and a new employee on the salary schedule and benefits. We continue to meet with the building administrators to talk about what they can do within their existing budget to redeploy existing resources. And then we've added discussions that will take place on school safety enhancements. And you had the budget presentation for OU BOCES today. There will be a board member election at the April 19th. Right now they have 2 nominated candidates for 2 open seats, and they're both incumbents to the board. And then any questions?
Now, when will we have the numbers with the percentages, the April meeting, Pat?
For?
Our projections on the tax rates.
Oh, for the tax rates? Yeah, I could do that if you'd like to. I could do that at the
Once
next
we
meeting.
know what the actual budget numbers are, then
Yeah,
we should be able to.
then we can dial it in. And again, it's
Still an estimate
right,
based on
right.
everything else. Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen with equalization rates, total assessed values in the municipalities, the apportionment split, that type of thing. But it'll give you a good ballpark number on it. Okay, well, thank you.
I have a question. I think this is to Mike, but I did some comparisons between the presentations we've seen thus far and last year's, and around this time last year there was a list of several positions that we were looking at as potential additions, and if I did my comparisons right, pretty much all but 3 of them were included in last year's budget. So what my question is, of those 3, there were specific needs at the time, which was why it was on the list, although they were prioritized out. Now my question is, are these still needed? Is the requirement that brought them to the list last year still needed? And the 3 positions are the technology education teacher, to be shared with the high school and middle school, a part-time phys ed teacher in elementary school, half-time, and a family and consumer science teacher, again shared between middle school and high school. So is the need still there for those positions?
Great question. It's a subjective answer. There's always needs, and balancing those needs in our budgetary projections is an important element. I know that we want to be very cautious as to putting more and more as far as expenditures go into our budgets. So unless there's additional dialogue from the board, at this point I wasn't prepared to advance those into a budget proposal. But there are solid program options that are behind a tech ed teacher that would be shared between the high school and the middle school, a part-time physical education teacher that would offer some kind of a structured recess approach to our recess time, and also family and consumer science expansion that would also be shared between our middle school and high school. So yeah, there are absolutely solid program offerings that would come from that, and how that translates is we would be able to offer more programs for more children in both of those schools.
Now I know
But that statement is true for virtually anything that we could add.
They weren't things that we adopted last year.
Correct.
Right.
We did not adopt those as part of the budget.
And we talked about those.
Yeah, like a technology teacher, I actually spoke on the podium about the fact that ninth grade students, there's more students applying for that course than can take it, so they're getting turned away, so to speak. And I talked about how this technology STEM education path that you have in the school kind of gets broken in doing that, which can sometimes discourage children to get back into that, right? And that's not really in support of our goal to continue to encourage it. But the question I really was going to ask too is, I know we're still working through the budget, but do we see any opportunities with retirements that have happened this year across all the schools, any other breakage where we could potentially fund 1 or more of those without necessarily raising the budget, right? I mean, there's a slide about that we're still working on it, and this is before I saw, excuse me, this is before I saw the page about all the safety potential for up to 350K. But when I was thinking coming in tonight, to ask that question, do you see any potential there anywhere where you can fund $50,000, $100,000 to add one or two of these things in without necessarily increasing our overall expenditures?
What we could do is prepare that as an option for the board to consider for the April 4th, is it 4th? Our next meeting is the 4th or the 5th? The next meeting. And then it can be part of the dialogue, because it's options. It's all about the pleasure of where the board wants to go with some of these things. So, and we could also have our middle school and high school principal prepared to speak to the program itself that stands behind these positions. But there are always options, John.
Yeah, I guess that would be good too.
It's a matter of
like-
maybe seeing it in black and white on a screen, so a debate and dialogue can be had regarding do we add or do we not, and what does that mean as far as our expenditures go.
And the impacts, right? So I'm familiar with the technology teacher because I happened to talk to Mr. Lawler last year and was asking him, but I'm not familiar with the other two. So, you know, as part of that discussion, I'd like to ask just to hear about what's the impact of there's nice to haves, and then there's courses that students are getting turned away because there's not enough teachers, for example. Technology is one example.
We'll be prepared to speak to that at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
And again, that'll give us, we'll know true numbers from the state too.
Absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
will help everybody and
Well, our revenue picture will be finalized at that point because we'll know our aid package, we'll know a little bit more about safety and security as far as what's going to be coming from Albany. So we'll have a real true picture of what can be afforded and what can't be afforded, and the board can make a open-minded decision on that. So.
Mike, one thing to piggyback off John, is it possible for the principals to have numbers of students that are enrolled in these technology classes, and if there is hard numbers of children being turned away because there's not enough teachers?
I'm looking at them right now, and they're going to nod yes. They'll have something.
No, not tonight, but
for the next meeting.
Yes.
And it'll be projections because they're programming right now, but we'll give some basic perspective of what would we be able to do with that kind of expenditure.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
all right? Is that Ryan? Got it?
Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve and authorize the following agreement, reports and recommendations as presented, personnel actions, CSE, CPSE recommendations, Board of Education meeting date change, Newburgh Health and Welfare Agreement, Board of Education unofficial meeting minutes for February 15th, 2018, and March 1st, 2018, and February financial reports. Can I get a motion to approve and authorize the consent agenda as presented? Joanne? Second, Frank? Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to bring something up. So Mike, just real quick, your explanation of the hiring process in general, I take it that was applied to the varsity football coach that's on this list tonight? And maybe anything you can share to how you wound up with the candidate?
Correct. It was applied to all positions that are newly being appointed tonight. The process was the process. Posted online through the OLA system. We had applicants. Some were internal, some were external. A committee was constituted by our athletic director. Athletic director pulled those candidates, and the committee reviewed and interviewed people and made a recommendation to me that is now in front of you.
Okay, thanks. Before we vote, I just would like to make a statement more to the public probably, and I guess the board too, is I'm encouraged to see Mr. Brian Beck on that list, knowing that he's a volunteer coach and has been for some years. I commend him highly for taking on such a challenge, considering all the controversy around all this and many discussions and various emotions across the community about this. I know Mr. Beck as a fifth grade math teacher. He's excellent. My son's in his class this year. He's done a fantastic job with me, helping me understand how to help him in various areas where he was troubling and various things. So I also think it's great that Mr. Beck would be some level of continuity for for the team, since he's been he's been a coach before, and hopefully this may encourage other volunteer coaches and assistant coaches to continue, because right now we haven't seen any on the list yet. But since we're about to vote, I just want to make a point that one of the things that struck me the most in these several months is just the impact on the students. There's clearly a lot of angst in all this happened, and one thing that came across that I really didn't understand in the past is that the football season starts very early, at least in terms of preparation, than you might consider. And right now, all our players are kind of basically laying in wait, not knowing what to do. They don't know who their leader is. They're waiting to see what happens, and I'm sure that's creating just even more angst on top of that. So as much as I know there's going to be some unhappiness, to say the least, about where this has turned out, I just feel like it's important now to really get somebody in and get the students to know where they're heading and get the team start to build itself again. There's various opinions on whether this is good or not, but I have to vote because this is what's being presented to the board tonight. And I just want people to understand that I think right now the priority has to be to let's get this team back in order and a leader in place. And so I'm going to support voting for the recommendation of Mr. Brian Beck. And I felt the need to tell the community, since we've had so many conversations for 2 months and there's people in the audience again, this is just because I just wanted you to know. And I felt the need to do it, and I hope you understand that's where my feelings are, and I hope the board will consider those things as well when we vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. The motion has been carried 6-0.
I'd actually like to introduce a new teacher that was just appointed, Jennifer Rendasio. Got it? Yes, very good. Jennifer, welcome. Jennifer has permanent certification in pre-kindergarten through 6th grade. She has her undergraduate degree from SUNY Brockport as a bachelor's in arts for children, and her graduate program from SUNY Brockport in elementary education with her master's. She's also coming to us with experience from New York City, Middletown, and also right now in a preschool program. So really has a lot of experience in those early years of education. Primary education in our elementary school and that K-2 world is so important. And Jen and I had a really great conversation about reading instruction and her passion for literacy and her passion for young children. So Jen, I'm so glad that you're here with us, and welcome to Marlborough.
Moving on to recommended actions. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the resignation of Mr. Stephen Hicks effective April 15th, 2018, in accordance with the terms of the separation agreement and release, a copy of which shall be placed on file with the district clerk. Can I get a motion to approve the resignation of Mr. Stephen Hicks? Joanne? James, second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion has been carried 6-0. Moving on to old business. Does the board have any old business?
Well, I'd like to further this conversation on the phone system, which I think we've been talking about on and off in different meetings. I understand, we're way behind because of the Smarter School Bond Act, with having an operational phone system. I also know that the radios we have, we're in the process of upgrading and doing, but aren't in place either. I'm glad that we do have hard lines, but the reality of it is, when there's a problem, you know, the building administrators a lot of times are out and about dealing with the problems. They're not sitting in the office to deal with that. I just think for the safety and the security of the amount of people we have there, I know it seems like it's a waste of $25,000 for a 3-month thing, but I don't know, with the amount of outages we've had, if it really is a waste. I mean, we can't expedite and do the whole system short term. I would just hope there's, you know, God forbid something happens, and with our poor cell coverage that we have and communications issues that we know we have, the one thing that you try and rely on are your phones. And the system's not reliable. And I understand everybody's trying to be fiscally responsible, but I just don't know if in the bigger picture, when we're talking about a $54 million budget, if a $25,000 expenditure is worth the risk.
I have a question, Mike, because you said it'd only take a month or 3 months to put the system. We haven't even ordered it, correct?
Correct.
So between me getting it ordered through purchase order through BOCES, we're talking actually more for the summer. And like Frank said, I'm more worried about the safety, and the $25,000, we use money for other things. To me, this becomes a safety issue. So for me, I think we need to take the switch out of Middle Hope and go forward, is my opinion.
Hey, Mike, one other question, maybe I should know this, but we do have approval for the new system? I know it was tied up in some of that state money for a while, but we have all that ready, just got to go do it?
Well, what we're doing is organizing an amount to move forward with the new phone system through a BOCES lease purchase. If you recall, during our Smarter Schools Bond presentation, the total amount of infrastructure work that includes the IP phone system was about $730,000. Half of that, or roughly half of that, we were going to fund through the Smarter Schools Bond. The other half, we were going to fund through an OU BOCES lease purchase. So we're still following that. We just needed to reshuffle what those numbers were so they match up where it's IP phone system, network infrastructure upgrade. And we're really just a few days away from having those final numbers.
Okay.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Witherow, who's going to work with Ms. Heppis, who was here this evening, to get that done.
Okay, so it's not necessarily dependent on the other things you're waiting for the state?
No, it isn't.
This is Safe Schools Bond. Okay, that's the part I was confused about. Okay, good.
It was dependent upon it, but we've reshuffled the deck so that we can move the project forward regardless of what happens with Smarter Schools Bond, which is one of the variables from the state right now. Some legislation is floating around up there also to force the move on district approvals for the Smarter Schools Bond Act. So they did hear us loud and clear when I met with the legislators that money's being held up. They heard from multiple districts. So we'll see what happens in legislation in the next 2 weeks as to whether that frees up some of that money also. Regardless, we reshuffle the deck so that we're going to approach the purchasing part of it differently, so we're guaranteed that this summer we can do the install.
Yeah, because even, I mean, it's not like it doesn't have DOE approval. It's made it through the approvals. It's sitting at a bureaucrat for financial approval.
Correct.
Who wants to have every line to match every piece of equipment,
Correct.
which is ridiculous.
What if we research an additional type of enhancement to so not per se the actual phone system, but a different type of security enhancement that we would be spending the dollars on where that could continue, but yet when you go ahead and upgrade the phones, that would not be a duplicate of money?
It would exceed the $25,000 amount. I know, like, you want an enhancement, but these core switches, like all of our network infrastructure is really end of life. And in order to make the IP phone system plus all the security enhancements work, the core switches that we need to put in place just exceed that amount.
and I know this is probably more of a safety committee conversation, but there are programs that when they're compared second by second with, say, an emergency happening and a staff member being very nervous about it and, picking up the phone and, the amount of seconds that go by and being able to actually make an emergency phone call and, be of sound mind and deliver that information opposed to, say, pulling down of a certain system that automatically goes into a database, alerts that of whether it be the police or various personnel within the school district. So that type of enhancement.
I see. Is there another lower cost technology that we could still use to communicate out in emergencies if the phone system was down?
And then alerts really like everyone in the building and the perimeter as to if there is, say, for example, someone trying to get into the school to do harm, it alerts them via computer or whatnot, where they are, what their location is, so they can be isolated. So that type of enhancement versus, the telephone upgrade, which is obviously very important.
Right, and that is the frustrating part because that feature is built into the new Cisco phone system. It's got the enhanced 911, so wherever the 911 phone call is made from, that notifies the 911 center of the exact room in the building, not just the building. Plus, it sends alerts out to any phone that we want it to. So, for example, if a 911 call was made from a classroom on the upper, hallway of the high school, we could have the alert go not only to, it goes automatically to the E911 system, but it could also go to the principal's office, the assistant principal's office, the nurse's office, the secretary, the you can go to any phone that you want as an alert that comes up on the phone. We also talked about dropping that same phone line right here in the police department, so they'll get the 911 call, but they'll also get that immediately. So right here in our local spot, they'll know before they actually get the 911 call center call that there's a 911 call. So again, I guess I'm beating that dead horse, that's the new system. Can't wait till it's in.
And one of the things you're talking about, Susan, too, is similar like the pendant, like the person in Stewart's wears. Right. There's legislation, one of the programs that's out there right now could require that for all people that are interacting with students. So we'll know very shortly here what the powers that be in Albany decide, because that's one of the specific things that it has to tie into your system to do just that.
Yeah, because when you look at the actual data on it and you're comparing system to system, you have a human being that's in an emergency situation, and it's just human error, human emotions, all of those things that could take place that can delay that scenario.
You're talking about something like a panic button type system?
I mean, I'm not.
That's what they
is. I mean,
I don't, like a central system that is, I believe, I forget, I saw one of them. A central system where you actually, go to a base, you pull something down, and immediately, through computerized systems, it says, where someone is coming in, what's happening. There's, an immediate response to that area, an isolation of the area. And furthermore, I think there are watches that teachers and personnel can wear where they automatically get alerted to that, so it further isolates the incident. So, you're talking seconds to get children to safety versus trying to figure it out from an outside standpoint of view and then going in.
We'll look for that and also run that through the safety team as well. So, thank you.
I have a question. A quick question. I'm actually on board with let's get the phones we have up to status. I mean, it's not, I'm with Frank. It's really not worth the risk to me. The question is the 25,000 aidable? Are we talking a true 25,000, or are we going to get a return on that?
It may be. We'll get a question for you, or we'll get an answer.
But the key to that is not if it's going to slow the process down.
Because
if it's going to slow the process down,
right?
Because then we wind up talking months, and it was really a waste. Because We've all been down that road with dealing with the radio thing, trying to get Ulster BOCES to do theirs.
I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be. If we purchase it through OU BOCES technology coaster, it should generate aid like anything else that we buy through that coaster.
Okay.
Just as long as it doesn't slow the process down of getting the fix.
Oh, no, I mean, it's gonna be what,
Ulster-
the aid will be generated off the ST3 report. It has nothing, that's not gonna hold anything up. Right.
And Mike, are you comfortable with the $25,000 estimate? You guys, or is that kind of a ballpark from somebody just, not
Well,
to
no,
challenge you,
I-
just curious how much due diligence you did?
It's an accurate count. There might be a few more hours here and there.
Okay.
Of course, I'd fight them if they were to charge us for that, but it's a very close estimate.
Okay, thanks.
Well, then I'd like to make a motion that we repair the phone system that we have now as quick as possible so that we can get it up and running and have it reliable.
I'll second. Second? Second. Joanne? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
We'll get it done right away.
Okay, any other old business? And for new business,
Bayside piece.
yes. For new business, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution declaring lead agency regarding the Bayside project. Can I get a second? Frank? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Whereas, subject to Town of Marlborough Planning Board approval of the site plan for the proposed residential project known as the Bayside Development Plan Project, the developers of the project have proposed to construct various improvements including road access, sidewalks, signage, stripping, and parking at the Marlborough Middle School. Whereas the Board of Education of the Marlborough Central School District, hereinafter board or district, will consider approving an agreement with the developer for the construction of the various improvements at the Marlborough Middle School as delineated on the site plan to be approved by the Town of Marlborough Planning Board. And whereas under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, otherwise known as SECRA, and its implementing regulations, the board is required to undertake and review of the potential environmental impacts, if any, associated with the proposed action before approving it, including classifying the action and declaring lead agency. Whereas the board, under the applicable standards of SECRA 6 NYCRR Part 617, believes that the scope of the proposed action will constitute an unlisted action and therefore require the board to declare itself lead agency and to prepare an environmental assessment form. And whereas it is the intent of the board to assume lead agency for the SECRA review of the proposed action, and whereas potential involved or interested agencies have been identified with regard to the proposed action as set forth in Exhibit A, annexed here too. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Marlborough Central School District declares that, based upon the record before it and under the applicable standards of SECRA 6 NYCRR Part 617, the proposed action is classified as an unlisted action, and under the applicable standards of SECRA 6 NYCRR Part 617.6, and having completed a short environmental assessment form, the board shall be lead agency for the SECRA uncoordinated review of the proposed action, and the board shall circulate the CEAF to the original potential involved agencies identified in Exhibit A, annexed hereto, and if after 30 days from the date of circulation of the CEAF there is no objection, or the date that the involved agencies decline lead agency, whichever period is shorter, the Board of Education shall be deemed lead agency for the review of the proposed action. Can I get a motion to, the annex, the Exhibit A? The Exhibit A, involved or potentially involved agency, New York State Education Department and the Town of Marlborough Planning Board. Can I get a motion to approve? James, second. Joanne? Any discussion? Joanne? We're going to vote. Joanne?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Frank?
Yes.
Russell? Yes. John?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Any other new business?
Were we talking about the safety committee now? Safety. Well, I just had something that I found very interesting. My niece came home over the weekend and stated that she goes up to Utica and that they're proposing to put fire extinguishers in each one of their rooms. Basically, it's, what is it, fight?
Run, hide, fight.
Run, hide, fight. So in other words, if there is somebody in there, they can pick up the fire extinguisher and squirt them with that, because it's like a pepper spray. They would freeze and it will give time for people to get out. And I just thought I would mention, since you guys were on the safety committee, it might be a little cheaper than looking at bulletproof glass, because if he's in the building or she's in the building shooting, that glass is not going to do anything to protect anybody. But at least with a fire extinguisher, and I thought that was pretty, smart, that that'll give you a couple more minutes for a teacher to spray somebody and get the kids and get themselves out, so.
We'll bring it up to the safety team.
Thank you.
Any other items for the board?
One more Orange Ulster School Board meeting, the dinner is next month, basically to discuss the budget and candidates. Okay? So if anyone would like to go, please let Teresa know, or.
What was the date?
It's April 4th.
April 4th. Thank you.
Just one other thing, Mike, we've had a lot of, obviously there's been a lot of, the storms have done a number, not only on your days, but the power throughout town's had issues and stuff. I don't remember in anybody's reports where we've had any issues with generators or coolers. And I didn't see anything in the food service. Have we had any issues with lost food and stuff like that? I didn't see that captured anywhere.
We've not had any issues with lost food. I just met with Fred today. He didn't come up specifically, but normally whenever we lose anything, he sends me an inventory of what was lost, and we've not had any information on that. I'll confirm it with Fred, but
Okay.
I think we only had some
Yeah,
brief
there have been
power
some
outages.
power outages, but they haven't been extensive. Just kind of dodged the bullet, I guess, so to speak. So, there was a substantial portion of Marlboro that was out 2 storms ago, but it wasn't our schools, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Moving on to public content for the recognition of district residents and others, I would ask that you approach the podium and speak your name and town of residence. And also, too, just a friendly reminder that there are 3 minutes per comment.
Okay. I'm Catherine Ciriello from Marlboro. As I stated in the email that I sent the board this morning, my support for Coach Ward is in no way indicative of a lack of support for Coach Beck. It has always been our hope that the entire coaching staff would be kept together as a team for these boys. Mr. Brooks and trustees, you said publicly that the student athletes and their parents would be involved in the process, and they weren't. We asked you to read the letters and listen to the kids, and you didn't. You only felt the need to meet with the boys after several parents complained, and then you only met with a few of them. They asked you to continue the meeting as you rushed out, and you never met with them again. At the last meeting, you said you would be happy to meet with anyone. You said it during the meeting, and then afterward, directly to Mrs. Walker. You gave her a list of requirements that she, I don't want to be too loud because I get a little preachy. Please stop my time. I'm serious. You gave her a list of requirements when she tried to set up the meeting up. She met those requirements, and you didn't contact her until today to say that the meeting couldn't happen. We asked questions, and the irony of some of those questions being answered for the first time tonight is not lost on me. We asked you what the procedures were. The most basic of personnel procedures was not followed this week. You announced a head football coach to the team before the board approved the appointment. Is Coach Ward the only one that was expected to follow procedures? We asked you to have the courtesy to speak with Mr. Ward about any other issues, and you have not. Your unwillingness to discuss these issues leads me to believe that there are none. I have a file here. There's not anything in here that's cause to let him go. I know that there are people employed by this district who have far more egregious things in their files. My own emails have been left unanswered by a majority of the board. That's rude and disrespectful. Thank you, Frank and John, for acknowledging me. We teach our children to leave the people and the things they come across better than the way they found them. Coach Ward taught his student athletes to work hard, strive to be stronger and better, and to win the day. When he broke down practices, he told them to respect themselves and their parents, to put school first and to act like champions. He built one of the most successful football programs in the state, 74-13 in 8 seasons. He has an 85% career winning record in Marlboro. His winning record last year was 90%. He has definitely left this program and his players better than when he found it. Comparably, according to the New York State Department of Education, his total winning record is twice as good as both the ELA and math scores for grades 3 to 8 over the last 2 years. His data for the last 2 years is 2 to 3 times better. You, on the other hand, have shown these boys that you would not listen to them, that you can't trust them, they can't trust you to keep their word, and that their voices don't matter. You have a depleted reserve fund, and taxes are going up. A board that has had a vacant seat for a year, and members who have missed excessive meetings this year and last year. The graduation rate decreased last year, and you have a bunch of involved parents who are now disenfranchised. So I'm going to ask you, who left Marlboro better than when they found it?
At the last board meeting, I brought to your attention that for months now, the community have been asking questions and getting no answers. You told me during that meeting that you would be happy to meet with me and answer my questions. At that point, I reminded you that there were a whole line of parents behind me that wanted to partake in such a meeting and get the same answers. After that meeting, you approached me and reiterated that you would like to meet with me and discuss this. You just couldn't do it in a public forum meeting. I gave you the benefit of the doubt and eagerly called to set up that meeting. Instead of picking a date, you made me jump through hoops. You wouldn't set a meeting until I sent you a list of who would be in attendance, as well as a list of questions that would be asked. I think you expected that I would back down and go away. I'm still here, and I will be at the next one too. I didn't. I jumped through every one of your hoops, and I sent your lists. Today, you left me a voicemail saying to call you, and I did. At that point, you informed me that the meeting was no longer an option as Coach Ward had retained an attorney, so you couldn't discuss it any further. Where did you get the information that Coach Ward had retained an attorney? Did you not tell me that he retained an attorney?
I told you I wasn't going to be able to discuss any of this in public because it's a personnel matter.
If we're going to go by rumor alone, certain board members have also been rumored to have retained attorneys. Maybe they shouldn't be sitting in their seats either. Did you think that I wouldn't ask him Of course I'm going to ask him. He's the only one that's being honest here. Was it really under the direction of the board that you'd not answer those questions? Or do you lie to everyone, or is it just me? You see, folks, Mr. Ward has in fact not hired an attorney at all. Mr. Brooks just doesn't care what any of us think.
You know, I do have to say that I am allowed to defend myself. And it's not a back and forth conversation. I haven't said anything that was dishonest.
You haven't said a word.
I've been courteous with you every time we've spoken. You sent me a list of detailed questions that I am not able to answer because, quite honestly, the person that you are referencing has the right to privacy that I can't breach.
Well, there were several on
that. At that podium, a gentleman identified himself as Mr. Ward's attorney.
He most certainly did not. He most certainly did not.
I am not going to make
He's
any
right here.
comments. I am not going to make any comments beyond what I'm saying right now. This matter is closed.
It's on
We
the
have a
internet.
coach.
Everyone
It's
can look
time
up the
to
meeting.
move on.
He did not say that. And it's on record for the Marlboro Board of Ed meetings. It is on the record. Anyone can look it up. That's another one of your lies.
Defamatory or abusive remarks are not going to be tolerated, and they are out of order. So we do have an executive session scheduled for the purpose of employment of a particular person and proposed sale of lease or real property. Can I get a motion to enter into executive session? James, second.
I would
Joanne?
like to speak.
All in favor?
No.
Okay.
So at the last board meeting, I asked to set up a meeting, and Mr. Brooks agreed. I went to Mr. Lawler and talked with him on the subject, and he said he would set up the meeting. That was about a week ago, and still no news on the meeting until today. I was told that he was going to wait until the new coach is appointed to have the meeting. Why is this? Do you not care to hear all the questions and loving things we have to say about Coach Wood? Did you even read our letters that the players sent in? Do you not take what we have to say into consideration? What other coach has taken time out of practice to have someone talk to us about dangers of drugs? I haven't seen any. I would also like to know why Coach Beck is more qualified than Coach Wood. I have seen Wood's file. The incident where the athlete was told not to return because he believed he was entitled to playtime just wasn't right. He didn't push himself at practice like everyone else did. If you want something in life, you have to work for it. This is something you should know how to do as you work to be superintendent, but obviously you lied to get there as you are not taking the community's views into consideration and representing us.
Monty, I spoke with you earlier that the athletic director, Mrs. O'Donnell, requested of me that she meet with the team.
As she did.
Which was early in the week, before I met with the team.
Yeah.
I thought it was appropriate for me to wait until after the Board of Education appointed a coach. Now that we have a coach in place, Mr. Lawler, Ms. O'Donnell, and the coach and I will spend that time.
Okay, but
it doesn't have to be immediate. We will spend that time. But I'm going to respect Mrs. O'Donnell and allow her to have that time with the team and also with the coaching staff and the high school principal to pull things back together.
Okay, so she had our time. She talked to us. And I'm just going to say, do you follow what everyone has to say or just her? Because I've seen the whole community, and we've all talked to you about Coach Wood. We've all said good things. I've only seen one person come to the stand and say something negative about Coach Wood. So obviously you don't listen to everybody. Why do you just listen to her? I wasn't told anything about Coach Beck becoming head coach until 3 days ago.
To be honest with you, it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation. We got criticism for meeting with the group on Monday, and now we're getting criticism for not meeting.
Because you met with the group.
So which
you
is
didn't
it?
meet with the whole team. You wouldn't have had
There's no
anything.
lying going on from this chair, gentlemen. Sir, there's not one lie coming from this chair.
You hide behind that desk like you're more important than everybody else.
Again, I welcome anyone from the residents to come, from the public to come and speak, but I would ask very respectfully, no defamatory remarks, or we will go into executive session.
Okay. I have gone through the Board of Ed Code of Ethics. I've gone through what it takes to be on the Board of Ed. I've gone through all of that. So I just have a few things I want to point out. The School Board Code of Ethics, constant endeavor to devote time, thought, and study to the duties and responsibilities of a school board member so that you may render effective and credible service. When you made your decision about Coach Ward, after you said that you would consider the kids and the community, you did not think about any of us or what the kids said or what the parents said, what the team said. It was about what you wanted. It was never, ever at all a thought about what we wanted. To work with fellow board members in a spirit of harmony, cooperation, in spite of differences of opinion that arise during vigorous debate on points of issue. 2 meetings ago, we all sat here and watched you battle about what an executive session is, what it means to go into one. Can I tell them what is in there? Is it secret? Is it this? We watched you go against each other. That is not supporting each other. You unraveled in front of all of us. To strive step by step toward ideal conditions for most effective school board service to my community in a spirit of teamwork and devotion to public education as the greatest instrument. Public education does not end inside a classroom. It happens in and out of the classroom. It happens during after-school activities. It teaches our kids how to grow as a person, a teammate, how to lose, how to pick themselves up and learn from a loss. I just never thought that our children would experience such a loss as losing Coach Ward at the hands of the Board of Ed and the superintendent. I know that they will pick themselves up. And I know that they will respect their new coach because their old coach taught them that. Their parents taught them that. And they will be exactly what we all taught them. They will be winners on and off the field. Mr. Brooks, board members, you feel like you've won because you did not rehire Coach Ward. Since the first meeting, our boys were the real winners. They were speaking to you with respect. They were asking questions. They were waiting patiently for answers. All the while, you turned their football family inside out and upside down, misleading them, disappointing them. Our boys are stronger, wiser, and stand together more than you can ever imagine because of what you've put them through. Not what Coach Ward has put them through, but what you have put them through. I suggest to you, in future correspondence, create a policy because the one you have has failed. Respond to emails, respond to phone calls, talk amongst each other, talk to the community members, ask them and really acknowledge them in what they want and what they feel. Take respect in what we say. You haven't done that. You just stare at us or you say that you're not lying. You have not spoken the truth yet. If that makes it sound better, then okay.
Respectfully, your time is up.
Let her finish. We are the community.
Respectfully.
All right, somebody else can finish for me.
Tracy Tambori. Suggestions: you need to create a correspondence policy, one that you are held to your word, that you and all board members respond to emails. We are the community you represent. What our votes support. There will be no you. The morale in the school you and Mr. Lawler run has been affected by the atmosphere of mistrust and fear, which in turn will affect and is affecting the learning experience and the district and the education of our students. How do you and Mr. Lawler get assessed? How do you, if you ever can, gain trust and lift morale in a school of students you just destroyed because of a personal vendetta. Since you decided to fire Coach Ward and because of your newfound interest in the football program, shall we sign you up for a team dinner, a Saturday morning breakfast, concession stand, fundraisers, let us know when you're free? Or will you
String us
along like you have been doing the past couple?
You're
My
free.
question is, who is the parent and the children on the committee? Because it was stated, it was quoted that they would be included.
I deferred the process to the athletic director and allowed her to follow regular protocol on how she puts together programs.
Okay. I think it's extremely disheartening that the students have been affected so negatively. I've spoken to multiple parents that have said that their children have lost sleep, their grades have been affected by this, and I will reiterate what Mrs. Ceriello said. Our graduation rates have declined. I know for a fact that Coach Ward, by this time, would have already been well aware of the students and their academic standings. He would have already reached out to players and said, I need to work with you. Can you work with this child to help them? Those are the things that are done behind the scenes by a coach that's dedicated, somebody that does more than just accept a paycheck, somebody that looks to become a part of the community and help these athletes grow into future successful people. This is what we strive as parents and as educators to do, to tell our students, our children, that it's not what you just do on the field, it's what you do in the classroom and outside, and it's how you reach out and help those in need. I'm rarely speechless. I cannot believe this has been done, and I'm just disgusted.
Ryan McDonald, Marlboro freshman. For the record, I'm not talking about anyone here, so let's not go into executive session just yet until we finish. But let's take a school district, for example, like Cornwall. Their superintendents and school representatives will listen to their community. Sounds like a district that every school should be like, but there are some exceptions. Egos. Some people's attitudes can get in the way of decision-making and prevent them from making a decision that would better those around them. Do you guys agree with me? I repeat again, this was not about anyone here or any school district here, so please let us finish.
Tim McDonald. I live in Marlboro. I'm going to come at this from a little different perspective. I've been at every board meeting the last 3 months, the last couple of months that this has been going on, with exception to the last one because of my daughter's basketball game. I just want to look at this through the eyes of someone that hasn't always lived in Marlboro. I've lived here 12 years now. I have a daughter that's going to be a senior next year. My son that's a freshman football player. My father was a teacher for 5 years, math and science in high school, and a basketball and football coach. Then he was a principal for 5 years. And the last 25 years of his career, he was a superintendent. So I've been to dozens and dozens of board meetings through my middle school and high school career. And the things that I saw happen were him engage with the community and listen to the community and what they wanted. How you become a superintendent for 25 years in the same school district is making wise decisions that benefit the students of the school, right? The students spoke out to you and told you what you wanted, told you what they wanted. But I don't think you really took that into consideration. The parents of all the students told you what they wanted. All right? We have a coach here that came to Marlboro for 8 years. 6 out of the 8 years, he won a Section 9 championship. I was going to football games in Marlboro before my daughter was even in kindergarten. It was a mediocre program before Coach Ward came here. Okay? You have somebody that's a world-class high school football coach that wants to give his knowledge and experience to our kids. He could go coach at any college, any other high school that he wants to, but he wants to give it to Marlboro. I support Coach Beck. Coach Beck coached my daughter in JV basketball the last 2 years. He's a great coach. But Coach Ward and Coach Beck together, that's a championship coaching staff there. I don't understand what you're taking into consideration for firing a coach because of a personal text that went between him and a player's parent, for telling somebody whatever, go to hell, whatever. That's ridiculous to think that somebody would be fired for that. But that's what you're leading me to believe. That's what you're leaving the community to believe. That you're letting a world-class educator and coach go. I know kids that have been waiting for 8 or 9 years to have an opportunity to be part of his team, right? They're going to be 10th graders this year. They're 1 year away for playing for Coach Ward, and you're going to take that away from them? I don't understand. And then when people want to talk to you about it, you won't set up meetings with them? I tried to talk to my father about this. When I go to board meetings with him, he'd sit there and talk back and forth, sometimes for 2 hours, and answer any questions that they wanted answered about any topic. And then telling the community that you can't go to a review session. In other states, in the state where my father was a superintendent for 25 years, all it took was 2 board members for any topic could go to an executive session. So I don't understand the picture that you guys have painted, the Board of Education and the superintendent, under your leadership, to say that you took into consideration what the community wants, what the parents want, what the students want for their coach to continue. So I ask that Mr. Beck stays on the staff and that you take into consideration of letting Mr. Ward be on the staff as well. That's all I have.
There is no further public comment. We do have an executive session scheduled for the purpose of employment history of particular persons and the proposed sale or lease of real property. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? James, second. Joanne? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?